Hi.
You have a better microphone than me. I'm going to have mic envy now.
I've got a pop filter so that I look really professional.
I think I need one because I have to laugh silently all the time.
Just dub it in afterwards.
So how are you?
Oh, I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Oh, just this time. It's funny. I think on a minute by minute basis, you can say to someone, I'm fine. But like on the whole, not fine. Don't ask me about everything at once, you know?
I love that I always respond, I'm fine. And I'm so good on like the social reels. So it's like, and then we say this. And I kind of feel like
That's
we're
right.
going, and how do you do? And how do you do? And how do
Yeah.
you do?
Yeah.
Because we don't really want the reality of it's all a little bit crap.
No, exactly. And what do you say to someone? Like, hey, how's it going in the apocalypse? Like, how are you feeling? And you can't say to someone like just constant existential dread.
Yeah.
Like, you just probably shouldn't.
I know. And then because you don't always feel better if you do.
No,
it's nice.
Rarely feel better, I think.
It's nice to pretend for a bit.
If you say it often enough, then maybe you can start to believe it, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah. So good.
Mm.
So you were saying that you're actually doing more in terms of sort of social interactions with the writing community since this started, because, you know, it's hard to get to things for many reasons. So I thought, yeah, that's kind of what I'm experiencing. I've spoken to more new people in the last month than I have in the last year, I'm quite sure. So how's that going for you now? Is it settling down? You find?
Yeah. Definitely less now than 2 weeks ago, I think. I think it's just so much. It's just like I never would have interacted with that many people during a normal time. So I think I got to a point where I thought, oh, wow, this is way more social interaction than I would normally have. And it was a lot. It was just too much. So also I think the impetus to like reach out, maybe it was normalized. It was sort of, you know, the beginning of this was very, very frightening. And then, I mean, I suppose you can acclimatize to pretty much anything eventually. And I feel like I got, it is. Like, oh yeah, the pandemic. Yeah. That's just a thing that's also going on.
Yep.
And your body or your brain sort of goes, okay, but we can't dwell on that all the time. And I mean, I'm a dweller. I dwell on everything all the time. But, you know, you can't sustain that level of fixation on it maybe. So I think I got to a point where I was like, do you know, I don't want to go to workshops 8 times a day. I would kind of like to just go to a couple of things in a week and try to have normal life for part of the time.
Yeah. And every evening I can't say to everyone, I'm busy, I'm watching another launch, or I'm doing another thing, although I still love them and I am still going to them. I didn't know I'd have this many options, and that can be a little overwhelming. And I find it difficult to subscribe to something where it's going to be, this will be 10 weeks, those courses, because I think I actually don't know what life will be like tomorrow, let alone in a week or 10 weeks to say, yes, I can commit time to that. Yeah. I feel like, and Easter plateaued. I feel like everyone just kind of went boom, and all the energy, well, for me anyway, the energy just went flop. And then it's kind of found a new rise again for me anyway now. But yeah, I never know when it's happening. I just think the world's ending again. And then it seems to magically not be ended and get a bit of a henny penny. So
oh yeah, I am as well. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and maybe that's part of it too for me, is like, oh, you always say the world is ending and it never has. So I guess this time it also isn't. And, you know, just hope that this doesn't date really badly. But yeah, I mean, I'm sort of in the business of catastrophizing. So it's hard to believe anything I say, even for me. Even me, I'm like, that's probably not true though, is it?
Yep.
So
I'm like, spray the package when it comes in the door because you don't know what's on that. But I'm also the one, if I really want it, we'll just pick it up and rip it open. But no one else is allowed to break that rule.
yeah.
Because
Oh, no.
I'm protecting them.
That's
like,
right.
You
Yeah,
all have
yeah.
to do it right. But I can get it wrong. It's my own, you know.
That's right. I know. It's like, this is a horrible thing to tell people, but if I think that food is off, I know that it's actually just me being paranoid. So I will feed it to my children, but I won't eat it. I'm like, oh, this food might be bad. And I know it isn't. And I know it's just my brain telling me that it is. So I know it's safe to give to them, but I can't convince myself that it's safe for me. So, you know, brains are weird. They do all kinds of interesting things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so the other thing, and I have to talk to you about it, and I don't know a good way to segue. I'm really bad at segues. I don't know if you know this about me.
Don't worry about it.
Like, I could attempt.
Chop it and we'll do the next thing. It's fine. 90 degrees. Let's do it.
Yeah. And that's because, brain's going, Ritalin is low at this time of day, so I do apologize. But you're doing a PhD. That's very exciting.
Is it? Oh, God, it just feels tiring to me.
Absolutely. Like, there are very few things in my life that I've really loved. Like, oh wow, I loved. Okay, and if I think too hard, there was some crap there, but I did love being able to fixate on something. I had an excuse.
That's true.
Do that. So, what is yours about, and what's happened to it lately?
What's happened to it lately? Not much has happened to it lately. I'm doing a creative writing PhD, so it's 80% novel and 20% exegesis. Yeah, and it's about the Adelaide Destitute Asylum, which was an institution in Adelaide it's very straightforward. I've just said the same thing twice. At the end of mid 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century, just before the war. And it was a place that the South Australian government set up to support people that the business of South Australia couldn't. So South Australia started as a colony, as a corporation. They set it up as a corporation. It was actually founded by a company called the South Australia Company, and it was designed to be the upper echelon of everything. Poor people weren't really allowed to go there. There were no convicts allowed, as everybody from Adelaide will tell you. There were no convicts. But also, you know, if you didn't have a certain amount of money, you were only allowed to work for somebody else, and until such a time as you had demonstrated that you were valuable enough to be in the colony, and all kinds of stuff.
Like South Australia.
Yes, it was a very white collar, you know, quite. It thought it was quite secular, but in a lot of ways it was deeply religious. A lot of the people who went there were Irish Catholics. There was quite a large proportion of Irish Catholics, lots of Presbyterians and German Presbyterians who had been, you know, vilified in Germany. And so it had, I mean, it's a city of churches, right? So it had more churches than pubs or some statistic. But what happened was, of course, that there were lots of people who ended up living in poverty there. And what South Australia did was create government support for those people, which was quite, like, in some ways quite progressive, the way that they set it up. But the fact that they fully believed that it wouldn't be a problem was not so. So the Destitute Asylum was a place where people who lived in destitution could go and stay for a period of time until, you know, ostensibly they got back on their feet, but often it was because they died. So they stayed there till they died. It was originally for people who were sick, and then it evolved into also people who were poor. And then they had a lying-in home there. So there was a maternity hospital there. And that was for women who had no other option but to give birth in the Destitute Asylum. So I found out about it because my great-grandfather was born there. So he was born there in 1890. And in researching him, I found out that his mother had had another baby there 3 years before that to a different father, and that baby died in the hospital. And then, she ended up back in there again. Her sister also had a baby in there. So it was quite interesting history, really awful. They talk about in the contemporary literature, they talk about like the way that the whole place smelled like cancer and this kind of thing. It was a really awful place where people just, you know, a lot of the time people just went there to die. So this is really upbeat. So my research is about 19th century women's fertility choices mostly. So how women came to commit infanticide and how women, what measures women took to control their fertility, and what it was like to give birth in a place like that. And how the medicalisation of women's bodies started in South Australia at that time. And, you know, eventually all births were moved to a hospital environment, but it was largely because, at this time in this place, because doctors basically didn't like the fact that women controlled so much about the childbirth process. So there was a large volume of infanticide cases, and they couldn't really prove it. And the problem was that midwives were able to write death certificates. And so you had what they imagined was women colluding. So a woman who didn't want to have a baby, who gave birth with a midwife who then said the baby had died, and then they would just, you know, recklessly abandon the baby. And that was what men imagined was happening. So, and look, sometimes it was, but you know, I mean, if
throw from witches though, yeah,
exactly. And if they had, you know, I mean, if these women had any say in their fertility in the first place, you may not have had some of these problems. So yeah, lots of illegal abortion kind of clinics, which were often doctors moonlighting, one of the bigger problems was concealment of birth. You could be charged, you could be hanged for appearing to be pregnant and then suddenly not appearing to be pregnant but not having a baby to show for it. So, you know, your neighbour could report to the police that you had concealed a child's birth and that child had been abandoned or murdered. So it was a really horrible time. It can teach us a lot about how we understand women's fertility now.
I was going to say, now we'll all love to think that everything's changed. When unfortunately, there's still such a hang up. Wow, I didn't know it was. I didn't know you were going to say that.
I know.
Like, okay, I like process.
Your nice, exciting PhD about? Oh yeah, baby murder.
Mine was like death and stuff, so it's fine.
Oh, good.
But I did it all with a smile on my face. But okay, and now this is a really nerdy question. But are you using like Foucault? Like, sorry, again, so nerdy. I'm really, really sorry. With like power and
a little bit,
conditioning of birth, like, you know, the whole legs up and the everything. How medical are you going? Is it a harder balance to find between the medical and the social?
Yes, it's very. I mean, the main difficulty that I have, which, you know, is a problem with historiography in general, is that men wrote it, and so, you know, it's all through the perspective of these white men who were also the policymakers, who were also the, you know, lawyers and judges, who were also the policemen. And what I'm kind of trying to get at with it is the way that they imagined women felt about their children, and the way they therefore recorded that the women felt about their children is maybe not exactly what it was like. So, you know, there's that trope of like, in Victorian times, people, and women in particular, expected their children to die. You know, you would have 8 children and you would know that 2 or 3 of them would die. And so you were just kind of okay with that. And that was one of the first things that I started looking at. It's like, what evidence is there to suggest that maybe women weren't as okay with that as history imagines they may have been? And, you know, looking for evidence of people grieving miscarriages, or, you know, there were quite a few death notices in the newspaper from that time for stillborn babies, and things that suggest that maybe it wasn't quite as clear cut as that children weren't disposable, which ties into the desperation of infanticide as a crime. You know, it wasn't because they hated their babies, but because they had so much, there were so many other forces that controlled what they could do to protect their families and themselves. Like at that time, I mean, some of the laws from there, so there was this, like one guy who sold his wife and then married another woman and then left her to go to the goldfields. And all of that was completely fine and legal and just left her with her children. But what a man could do, if he died, if he didn't like his wife, he could just bequeath the children away from her. So a woman could still be alive and have like 6 children and then lose custody of them because her dead husband thought, so they could actually end up in state care instead of being with their mother just because their father willed it.
Yeah.
So stuff like this where, just total lack of control. Yeah. And I mean, at that time, yes, a woman was it's chattel. You got bound, bundled up into your husband's property, and that was how that went.
But with both male and female children as well. So I guess when they're children, they don't really count as male or female yet. So
no, that's right.
Yeah.
They're just
okay.
Yeah, you just put them in with the rest of your stuff. So so look, it's pretty heavy going at times, but it's interesting to think about. So I've got an essay that's in the current issue of Meanjin, which is autumn 2020, maybe. It's got a wonderful essay from Alison Whittaker on the cover. And in that essay, I'm sort of like musing on the way that the law was made and whether that shows any understanding or compassion or leeway from policymakers in terms of, to have a law called infanticide at all needed to, at some level, understand why a woman would commit a crime like that, because it was separate from murder or manslaughter. It evolved from manslaughter, but it was a separate crime that could only be committed by a woman. There's no equivalent crime for a man. And so what does that say about what those people understood of like the challenge of birthing and raising a child? And it still exists. You can still in Australia be charged with infanticide if you kill a baby, your own baby, within, I think it's different in different states. I think in Victoria it's within the first 12 months of their life, or if you're still breastfeeding, you can have this separate charge called infanticide.
Separate charge, which has separate punishments.
Yeah, they're basically the same as manslaughter, but it is separate from those crimes. Yeah, so it's quite interesting.
Can you also be charged with murder? Or
not if it meets the criteria of infanticide. I don't think is my understanding at the moment. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, it is quite heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, then how do you come down from all of that? I know you like video games, so that's silly if I say, do you like video games? But when you've had a really deep day of thinking about all the ways in which the babies are dying and the women are suffering, like, what do you do to come down from that? Or do you? Oh, no. Okay.
No, well, I mean, some of this stuff is stuff that you just think about all the time, I think. I know that I do in one way or another. And often it's things like the mental load of being the wife and the mother, and just how much extra load that is, even now, even in 2020, that, there's still this, and my partner is a very helpful guy, but he will never understand what that mental load is. And so, I mean, at one level, it's just constant, the kind of inequity of being a woman, and then all the different layers of being, a white woman or a disabled woman or a woman of color or a gay woman or that all of those people obviously have different levels of disadvantage. But I mean, I think about that all the time. But and then I play video games where I shoot zombies, and that's a bit better. It is a bit better. It's
a funny thing. But it's weird that no matter how much we know, like I have a husband and he did a PhD on gender, well, in video games, hilariously, but whatever. Yeah. And so he knows, and I know the shitty situation that we find ourselves in all the time, and that we can't seem to break away from because of how we've been because of the culture we live in. And so I find myself here, I am the one working in the living room, he is the one working in the study. Because I can't do more, my position won't change. And we can see this. I'm probably talking in vague terms, because it's just like, I even hear it and I'm like, oh God.
I know. I know.
And yet we still do it. And every time he cooks dinner, I will feel guilty.
Yeah.
So it's like, who are the people who don't?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I haven't met those people. I mean, I'm the same, but like my partner at the moment, I'm working a lot, which I'm very grateful for. But my partner will notice that I'm stressed and then ask if it would help if he made dinner, which is really, really nice. But also there's like a dozen thought processes before that I've had to do anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, it would be so amazing if you made dinner, but also I have bought the ingredients and I know what we're having, and I have tried to, help the kids with their homeschooling, and I have done my work, and I have thought about what I'm going to make for dinner, and I have made lunch, and I have, cancelled the delivery for this, and I have like all these things that I've also done.
And
like
who was the fallback position? Who is the fallback? So childcare is always, I'm the person who is responsible, and then there is help. And what do you think immediately if you hear that all the children are going to be at home to do their schooling? So 3 kids at home in 3 different schools, and different levels for me of education. For me, I immediately think, well, there goes my life and career.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, but
so
for sure.
much. I really do.
I know. I think any parent will understand that dichotomy.
Yeah.
It's like I have worked from home for the past 7 years full time, and my ex-husband, my kid's dad, hasn't asked me if I need help with school holidays for probably 5 years. It's just, it's just like assumed that, and I work all through school holidays, but I'm at home. So
like, I will have to edit this out because that's all too much. But anyway, so yeah, the responsibility always falling on really weak shoulders, it feels like.
It's impossible to explain to someone. You can't explain how tough it is. I think that's where we fall down, is like if I'm trying to explain to my partner, who's a man, nothing I say will convey the magnitude of it. There's no words for it. You have to experience it. So I got pregnant with my elder daughter when I was 19, and my mum said to me, like, this is going to be such hard work. I was like, yeah. I mean, obviously it's a baby. How hard,
It's nappies.
I know
it's all nappies.
I know it's going to be hard, but it's not going to be unfathomably hard. And it was completely unfathomably hard. It was so hard. And I'd sit in my lounge room when she was little and just could still feel how tired I was, and just be there like, it's much harder than I ever could have understood. And, and then like when my sister-in-law had children, and she was pregnant with my nephew, and I felt myself kind of stupidly saying it to her, like, it's going to be really hard. Like, but I can't explain how hard to you. It's so hard. It's
taken me this many years to stop bothering. Like if someone says they have trouble breastfeeding, I can now go, oh, that sucks. And I don't say anything else. Because there was a period of time where I had no idea. Then there was a period of time where I would give advice or try really not gently to go, have you tried? Bloody whatever, lanolin, I don't know. Have you done this and have you done that? And then it took probably 3 kids till the point where I've just gone, that's really sucky. Do you know what I mean? It just took me so long to realise that there was nothing I could do. Yeah. And they were just going to suffer, because you just do.
Yeah, well,
I
exactly.
A friend, my 16-year-old best friend, actually she was 17 by the time she gave birth, and I remember visiting her in hospital. It's one of my most vivid memories. And I remember her breastfeeding her newborn, and the size of her nipple and the colour of it. Like, what the hell happened to that? It didn't look like that before. And watching her do that, and how impossible it looked. It just looked impossible. And thinking, I will never understand. And 10 years later, I was there going, oh yeah, this is like what happened to my nipples, you know.
That's true. What did happen?
And they never go back.
No, they never do.
My sister told me this. She said, no one will ever tell you, Anna, and I will tell you, they will never go back to what they were before.
No, not even close. I look at mine, I'm like, how did this happen? How did this happen?
Madonna has nothing. Oh my God. And then they don't work. No one told me about dysphoric milk ejection syndrome, where every time you get a letdown, if you have dopamine issues that I have, you get a crash. Have you ever felt that dopamine crash where you feel like your whole world's imploding and you're going to die?
No, I've never felt that.
Oh my God. So like get it a lot with ADHD is like a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then I would get that with every letdown. And if I get one now, bizarrely, my youngest is 7, but you can still get that feeling if you hear a baby cry or something. You go, oh crap, you know, and then that's it. And it sinks and the world. So every time I had a letdown, which you get constantly when you're feeding, and then you get diagnosed with postnatal depression, which was just depression with dysphoric milk ejection syndrome.
Yeah, okay.
So for every baby, I was then bracing myself for intentional hell. Weird. It's very weird, but no one knew about it. Now, I told the same lactation consultant at the hospital 3 times, and I gave her the handouts because once I figured out what it was, and I went in and told her, I figured it out. I found this thing. There's now a group of us and some scientists and whatever. Oh, wow, she'd say. And then a few years later, I'd be back. Oh, but remember, I have this. Is there anything that you think we could try or do to help? She goes, I've never heard of it. Like, oh, for God's sake, I told you. Years later.
Told you with my own voice.
I'm back, you know. And you're not, and they didn't remember. So, yeah, there's a whole lot of being extremely silent and voiceless when you have children.
Oh, completely. Yeah, when I had my first daughter, so I was 20 when I had her, and I was sitting in the hospital room with my fiance, who was also 20, and the midwife came in and she said to me, "Who's your social worker?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, you need to give me the name and contact details of your social worker." And it's like, I don't have a social worker. What are you talking about, kind of? And she argued with me. She's like, "But you must have a social worker." I don't know what to tell you. This is my fiance with whom I live and our baby. I know we're only 20, but I don't know what to, like, how to, I don't know what you want from me. She was so mean to me. She was just constantly telling me what I was getting wrong. Like for 3 days, it was just, don't hold her like that. She's cold, put socks on her. She needs to be, you know, all this. By the time I left there, I just felt like I would never know how to be a parent. So,
was that one of those ones where because I went into what it was called Riverton here, where it was an institution for non-sleeping babies and the mothers who were faulty. So you all went and lived there for a week. And I got into one of those. And they actually left her screaming for like...
Oh, that's so distressing.
2 hours I found her, and the nurse had gone home and not handed her over. After they tell you you're not allowed to go down there because they're doing it. So yeah, I found that as one of probably the most traumatic experiences.
No, that's awful. No, my children were both excellent sleepers and they're still excellent sleepers. So I just got really lucky in that regard. But when my bigger one was 5 days old, I think, I went blind temporarily, and I went to the hospital, and they left me on a gurney for 11 hours. and then when they finally saw me, they went, "All right, you have to get in an ambulance right now. We're taking you to the Alfred to have an emergency MRI." And it turned out that I had ocular migraines. But they did put me on this really hardcore migraine medication, and I couldn't breastfeed anymore. I couldn't do both. I couldn't breastfeed on this medication. And so the combination of all those things I had trouble bonding with that daughter for a really long time. And she was like a perfect angel in every way. Not every way, but in a lot of ways. She was, she was a good sleeper. She was pretty easy to get along with, and still is. And I just like look at, I had really bad postnatal depression, which I didn't have with my second daughter. And I just look at her and just be like, what's the point of this? And like almost ask her about it. Like, what are we meant to do now? Like, what are the two of us doing here together? And I reckon it wasn't until she was 6 or 7 that I really felt like, oh, now I get it. And I had my other daughter 2 years after her and immediately bonded with her, and breastfed her until she was 1, and didn't have postnatal depression, and really felt strongly connected to her. But it took me a really long time to kind of understand the relationship that I had with my older daughter. And now I almost can't remember feeling like that, because I think she's so wonderful. Like, look at her, like, oh, you're amazing. You're such an amazing person. It's hard to recall those feelings almost, but it was really tough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I had the opposite. We were she's over there doing a maths now. We were overly bonded. My oldest, because she never left me because my boobs were dysfunctional. And so I was told to keep feeding. So I fed all day and all night.
Oh my God.
With this dysphoria. So I was bawling my eyes out. And I didn't know I had to go and see nurses. No one had really explained that you go for checkups at the nurse thing. I went to the doctor once, who weighed her in her clothes and went, oh, she's fine. And so they didn't notice she was losing weight. And by 3 months, she was really quite thin. I was just streaming, and we hadn't. And then I'd been told she had reflux. This was the second visit to the doctor instead of a nurse. Doctor said, oh, it's probably reflux is why she cries every time you put her down, the starving baby. So I had to give her medicine for that. And then she lived on me, and we never were apart. So it wasn't like loving someone. It was like my arm, it was like, you don't like love your arm. It just is your arm.
It's like an extension. Yeah.
And so she's very much always been kind of the other part of me. But then, and my husband at that time, he said, oh, this is all wrong. We need to go and sort this out because you keep crying. Which obviously he found very distressing that I was crying. And and then they very late in the picture realized she was I finally went to a nurse, and they weighed her and went, oh my God, you need a bottle straight away. And she needs to go and be fed. And they were right. And I comp fed for a year because I was just told that a teaspoon mattered. So she got that teaspoon. Come hell or high water. And it was, but we weren't, so we were so bound together that there was no separation there. But I don't have quite the same connection to my other two, just in probably a more normal way. With them, like it's just a bit more normal. But yeah, we went the opposite. But again, it's weird now to think back how I didn't know that, how little I trusted myself that there was a problem. I just had no faith in what I thought. Everyone would say, trust your gut instincts. I'm like, I don't have them. Don't have a gut. And if I did, it doesn't have instincts. It has hunger, and it churns, and it gets diarrhea. It doesn't tell me what to do with the baby. So, wow, I'm totally offloading on you. This is terrible of me.
It's good. No, it's not terrible. Oh, no.
Oh, wow.
I haven't talked about this stuff for years. This is what happens now when my friends have children, because, my friends are now, they have primary and preschool age children, and some of them are still having babies. And I have nothing to impart because it was so long ago that I can't remember anything about it. Like, I don't even really remember like what I was worried about or what I thought about, and people are like, what helps someone when they have a new baby? I'm like, I have no idea.
What do you do with 2-year-olds? Someone was asking what things would be good. I'm like, what can you do with a 2-year-old? I Googled it. I don't know.
Like, what can a 2-year-old do? I can't remember. What does a 2-year-old do? Can they talk? Can they? I mean, no, they can talk. But
going through assessments.
Some of them do.
My daughter did. I had to look it up. On my phone to see what videos I had, because when you fill in, when you get assessments for ASD, and we're all assessed and let it up to the wazoo, and they ask you, how many words did they say by the time they were, I don't know, 3.5. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know.
Idea. No.
I fed
I
them.
remember them asking me that and being like, okay, so what was her birth like? And I was like, fine. Like, I don't know what
Yeah. Do you want to
information you
judge me?
need. Yeah, it was
Were
hard.
there any complications? It's like, well, how complicated do you mean?
Yeah, like what level of, I mean, I was in labor for like 30 hours, but otherwise it was pretty fine, I guess. I don't know.
It
And then like,
hurt.
well, when did she talk? I'm like, well, she was like nearly 3 when she was really talking, and like, like, but she could read. And they're like, like, I don't understand what information you want from me. And you are diving into the very deep bowels of my memory, because all of this is a blur.
Yeah.
I don't, what's
Oh,
the
God,
difference
yeah.
between 2 and 2.5? I don't remember.
I don't know. And is it scientific? What they, where they sit on some scale? I'm not quite sure. And the years I got divorced, God knows.
No idea.
I'm
No
not quite
idea.
sure how they got fed or dressed or anything, but they survived.
No. I can remember so little of that time. I think about my dad or someone will say to me like, oh, remember Lily's 4th birthday? I'm like, no. No. What happened at it? And he's like, oh, you made that cake. And you're like, did I? Gosh, that was good of me.
I did a mum thing. I haven't made a cake so long.
Wow, I made a whole cake. Wow, that's really, just getting divorced is like erasing part of your brain, I think.
Well, you'd hope. No.
Like, luckily.
Oh, God. Yeah, no, it's rough. And my oldest has the memory of, like the elephant memories, everything. Yeah. Every gift, she knows who gave it to her and when. And everything is set on a very specific timeline. And I can't, for the life of me, remember what I did on Thursday last week. Useless. No idea.
I know. It's like when people say, what did you have for dinner last night? And like, honestly, it could have been anything. It could have been anything. I know we had tortellini. I've remembered. Night before that, no idea. Just nothing.
We had pizza
it just
a few nights
isn't
ago
in there.
because I ate the cold one today.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah. Just like the stuff that stays in there is not what I expected, I guess. Being middle-aged and thinking about memory and like what I can recall and what's important to remember. And it's like, I can remember my dad's credit card number from when I was 17, but I can't remember what I had for dinner. I'm like, why though?
Yep.
It would be really useful to be able to instead remember that the kids have a thing they have to go to tomorrow, instead of like recalling how bad it felt when I was 9 and my friend took my paint and it was yellow and I did, I just, oh my God.
Yeah, but absolutely.
I guess those things help with writing, maybe.
I was about to say, those are the things that go in a book, because it's like you take that little kernel of how it felt. For me, it's always those deep moments of when you felt something amazing or crushing, or, the little deaths, like, all the little orgasms and all the little moments you just thought you wanted the world to swallow you, and make some other reason for it to have happened, maybe. But they're the bits that I have to write.
Oh, yeah.
The rest of it goes around it. Those are the bits that I have to get to and then get out of somehow.
Yeah, lots of stuff from my childhood goes into my books just verbatim. And like my parents read them and they go, you didn't even try to fictionalize this. I'm like, yeah.
I have used one, I think, and I wonder if my mum will ever read the books or if she'll remember this one. But when they forgot my birthday, we were overseas and we were in a caravan outside someone's house, and I went inside in the morning and then I came back out and I went, Mum, they gave me presents. They said, it's my birthday. And she was like, oh, yes it is. Happy birthday. So that was the third child of 4. And so she rarely remembers anything like that about my childhood. But that's more of she had 4 children and did everything, sort of.
Yeah.
So she had them in 3 countries.
Oh, gosh.
And so in Thailand, I was born in Thailand, and there's a birthing story for you, which was not done in poverty, and it was done in a very Christian hospital sort of situation, but no one spoke English. And so she was had me hanging out, and she's like trying to ask the guy who used to bring her lemonade every morning. Everyone went on morning tea at the same time.
Yeah.
So she's banging on the door going, the baby, and he's saying lemonade, lemonade. And then she eventually got him to go and get the doctor. And that happened. Wow. So that was it. I just come out at a convenient time. That's me.
But I mean, I have a lot more empathy for my mum now. Like when I remember, this is a memory I hold on to. When I was 5, I had a birthday party, and my dad we had quite a large backyard, and my dad hid a little like teddy bear toy, like a figurine. He hid one for every child, and then made personalized treasure maps for every single child that marked where their teddy bear was, and a list of clues, and like all this. He did all, and then my mum, it's horrible. My mum bought a death by chocolate cake, and she cut it all up, and she gave everybody a piece except for me. And I remember I held on to how bad that felt for like 15 years. And every time we had a fight about something, I'd be like, but you didn't even give me a piece of my own chocolate cake when I was 5. And she was like, I'm sorry. There were 28 children there. I just missed it. I'm really sorry. And I'd be like, how could you miss your own child's birthday cake? I was standing right there. And, now I'm like, oh my God, it's amazing you remembered to get a cake at all. Like the fact that she was a lawyer, and so she was teaching law and practicing law, and she had 3 little children, and my dad worked interstate all week, every week. And I'm like, you did give me a piece
of my cake.
It's shameful to think about. I'm just like,
I know. No, I really hope my youngest child feels this one day. For all the things she's already remembered. She's totted them up, all the things I've done to her.
Yeah.
All the times she's been hurt, the dog ran her over or whatever. And I feel for her because she's the 3rd child, although there'll be no 4th since I have no uterus. So she's totting them up though. She's like, this happened. And then there's the time you forgot to put my seatbelt on. And so that's why every time we get in the car, she screams that I'm not allowed to take off yet because she hasn't done her seatbelt. Because once when she was 4, I forgot and had to stop down the street. And I had not told her it happened more than that because I would never hear the end of it.
But I mean, the flip side of that is how complex trauma starts. Like I am very empathetic to my mum, who now is completely brilliant. But also when I go to my therapist and talk about my many feelings, and she's like, why do you think you're afraid of going in the car? And I'm like, well, maybe it's because of this one time when like my mum pulled over and she just like cried for 20 minutes and told us that we weren't going to get there. We weren't going to get to wherever we were going. And she couldn't go on, and she just couldn't do it, and she couldn't face it. And that when you're like 6 and an adult says that to you, you're like, oh no, okay. So going in the car is bad and dangerous, so we won't go in the car anymore. And even though as an adult you go, no, well, I understand now, she was just having a hard day and she didn't feel like she could keep going, and that's fair enough. I feel like that all the time. But your 6-year-old inside is still going, no, it was bad that, we could have died, or she could have crashed, or she could have. And so, like, I think about that all the time with my kids, where I'm like, I'm doing this thing that's actually a very normal mother thing to do, but the way that they understand it is going to be different, and trying to be really mindful of like the way they could interpret what is happening, what I'm doing. And I think one of the things I've really tried to do, being a very anxious person, is to articulate my feelings to them in a way that makes them understand that it's not dangerous. So, one of the things I had to teach myself how to do is like talk to them through a panic attack. So when they were small and I would have a panic attack, I'd have to like try to retain enough wherewithal to go, hey guys, I know that I seem like I'm really falling apart, but it's just my brain telling me some lies. And in a minute, it's going to be okay. And you're safe and I'm safe. And this is just a thing that's going to happen for a couple of minutes. And trying to like give them some framework for what some of these things were, because my mum used to have panic attacks, which I now recognize as being that, but she didn't explain what was happening, and so all we understood was that something horrible was happening to her. And that's, it's hard to, even when you can rationalize it and understand it, hard to let go of some of those old feelings.
I tell them I get cranky when I'm anxious, and it took me so long to realize what was going on. But when I'm anxious, I get quite angry, and I will tell them off more and more and more. And oh, she just took her headphones off and now she's nodding. Go away, I love you very much. So now I'm trying to tell them, I know I seem really cranky, but it's because I'm worried about something or other. But then I worry, because you can always layer them. There's no limit. That I'm over explaining.
Yeah.
Like I'm telling them more than I need to, or giving them more things to be anxious about that they didn't have yet, because they're all a bit anxious too. So I have to battle with myself over how much is oversharing, how much is not enough. And, I don't want them to think it's their fault all the time if I'm a bit snappy, when I'm normally a very easygoing person, but more and more lately I think I've been getting really snappy.
Yeah, my 15-year-old is very anxious. She has been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, but I often wonder whether what I have said to her or what she's been exposed to hastened it, or I hope that what it did was give her some language to describe it to somebody, and to not feel like she didn't know what was happening. But you just never know. Like if I had never mentioned it to her, would she have ever become an anxious person? And then I'm like, well, I'm at least the fifth generation of anxious women in my family. So pretty good chance she would have become very anxious anyway. But maybe if I blame myself, better keep making it something I do.
Try. And we've only just realized my 94-year-old grandmother is probably having panic attacks rather than constant minor heart attacks that they can't detect. So we've just figured out at this age that she's not just controlling, but she's actually anxious, and that what's happening to her when she goes out is probably a panic attack.
The same thing has happened. My grandmother is 95, and she had the same thing. She walked out into the street and suddenly she felt like she couldn't move her legs. So she has a walker, but she felt like she went to the letterbox and felt like she couldn't move anymore. And she had a panic button. And so the ambulance came and they took her to the hospital, and they thought maybe she had a stroke, and they ran all the tests and they scanned her brain and they said, no, you haven't, nothing appears to be wrong with you. But then every time she was feeling isolated or lonely, or it was too hot, some various different factors, this would happen to her again. She'd be like, my legs aren't working. And eventually, they just said to her, like, you're having a panic, so like either a panic attack but you're having an anxiety response. And that's all it is. And you're not in danger, but it feels really horrible. Sorry. There's not really much we can do about it. And so I mean, similar thing like that. And I've been thinking a lot about like all of the people who are newly experiencing anxiety during coronavirus, and the way that anxiety manifests in your body. Like for me and for lots of people, stomach pain, chest pain, shortness of breath, feeling lightheaded, hyperventilating, all these sorts of symptoms. Body weakness, I get like the whole left side of my body gets weak when I'm anxious, and that a whole group of people might now be experiencing those kinds of things for the first time and not being able to identify what they are. And, just going, hey, I think I'm having a heart attack because my chest really hurts. Like, well, actually, this whole situation is so worrying that maybe you just feel frightened. Maybe you're just like afraid.
And that you don't necessarily, you may not be thinking about it at that time. That's what always gets me, is it can just come out at you, even though you're generally worried and you've had moments where you're actually consciously thinking about something. The actual symptoms can come at you, kind of feels like they've come out of nowhere. Things happen and they don't feel connected. They feel like they're different.
Yeah, I think you can have the physiology of anxiety without having anything like an anxious thought. Sometimes I don't even know I'm anxious until I realize that my heart is racing. I'm like, oh, but but I didn't think about something that I was anxious about, or I'm not conscious of being anxious, but my body is manifesting these anxious symptoms anyway. It's very tiresome.
It's exhausting.
And just stop it. Just slow down. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah, the other half of you saying, you know what, you were the most chilled out person, I don't know, 20 years ago. You wouldn't have worried about this. You don't need to worry.
I know.
And there's older me going, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah, like you don't understand. There are no limitations about what I can worry about now. Sorry, 20 years ago me. I know you were super relaxed, but now we worry about everything.
Yeah. Oh,
constantly.
My goodness. I actually had to, it's the first time I've been out in ages because I went to the bookshop. So.
Oh, that's a nice place.
They did drive-by delivery. So,
fun.
Drive-by pickup.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I went and picked things up and then I came home and I achieved all of it. And I had 3 hours to make a 20-minute trip. And that took a lot of build-up and I did it and I still feel like I might vomit, but it's fine.
Oh, that's a really nice feeling, except for the vomiting. Yeah.
Did it. Sorry, I got the goods.
So much. It's not this. I mean, it's nice to get books in the mail, but
oh God, I can't even explain.
No, I don't understand what you mean.
Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Bye.